Alright, so let's take a few minutes and let's discuss how we can take advantage of the lunar phases in aiding our methods of concealing our movement from night vision devices, or NVGs. I want to start by saying that this is not a cloak of invisibility. This is not going to make us completely invisible from an NVG device, but it is going to add to our skill set and the tools that we have to help conceal our movement. I recommend to pair this with different strategies and to use them together where possible. But this is a very effective way in concealing our movement from a night vision device. Before we get too deep into the lunar phase, or the lunar calendar that I have behind us, a very rudimentary diagram, there's just a couple quick things we need to know about NVG devices. Alright, so for them to function effectively, there needs to be some ambient light in the night sky. If it's 100% dark outside, the device is not going to work effectively. There needs to be some ambient light in the atmosphere. Of course, the user can get around that using infrared, but infrared, using that, will give away the user's position if you yourself are using a night vision device. There is methods that we will discuss in future videos of how we can conceal our movement from infrared devices as well as from thermals. But right now I just want to focus on taking advantage of lunar phases and aiding our concealment. And one last thing about NVG devices, for them to work, or how they work rather, is they show in the image, they show the user contrasts between an object and its background or its terrain. And that would be contrasts with color and contrasts with light. That's the difference between color and light between the object and the background or terrain. Alright, so I spoke about how there needs to be some light in the atmosphere for the NVG to work. So that means then we want to time our movement when evading night vision devices when it is going to be darkest at night. That time period is going to be during the new moon. Alright, so that's when we look up in the sky and all night we don't see the moon at all. It's not reflecting light on the surface of the ground. We don't see the moon at all. Alright, so 7.5 days from there, 7.4 kind of thing, we get to our waxing gibbous. That's when half the moon is going to be visible. At that point, the moon is providing 50% illumination. From that point, another 7.5 days roughly, you get to the full moon, where the moonlight goes from 50% all the way up to 100%. And from the full moon, it goes back from 100 to 50% when it gets to the waning gibbous. And that's when it returns to only half the moon being visible in the night sky. And from there, another 7.5 days roughly, you get back to the new moon. Again, that's when it's darkest at night. So why is this of interest to us? Well, flight crews specifically, they talk about the 40-30 rule. Alright, so that's going to be the 40-30 rule. So what does this mean? So the 40 is percent. For the moon to effectively work as sort of a spotlight for an NVG device, it needs to be providing at least 40% of its illumination. 2 days before the waxing gibbous and 2 days after the waning gibbous, that is when the moon's illumination at night dips below that 40% illumination, giving us an excellent window when to move at a time where the moon is not going to be giving adequate illumination to a night vision device. So that will be below 40% during that window. The 30 is 30 degrees. Something else that flight crews often speak about when they are pursuing targets and looking for objects or whatever they're looking for, they say that the moon needs to be at a minimum 30 degrees on the horizon. Once the moon dips below that 30 degrees, the angle is too low on the horizon for the moon to function as that spotlight that we spoke about. The only time where the moon is going to provide any benefit to an NVG device during this window is there's only basically think of it as 2 times. So from the new moon to the waxing gibbous, the moon sets at sunset or just after sunset. This limits flight crews, their window for flight, to a very short period, just after sunset, when it is just dark enough to fly. So when we are moving between the new moon and the waxing gibbous, we want to time our movement later in the night. As the lunar phase gets closer to the waxing gibbous, we want to keep pushing our movement back as that moon illumination window from sunset on becomes longer and longer. But our best time to move is around this new moon phase, and time our movement just after sunset. All right, so the waning gibbous, that will be the opposite. The sun begins to rise early in the morning. I'm talking 5, 6, 7 a.m. type thing. The closer you get to the waning gibbous, the earlier in the morning it's going to rise. So we want to time our movements as late in the morning as possible, as close to sunrise as possible. All right, so I also spoke about the moon working as sort of a spotlight for an NVG device. So when we are moving, if we are moving at night when the moon is out, if possible, we want to keep our direction rather, against the moon. All right, so there's the moon. Here's us. We want to be moving towards the moon. Why is that? If a flight crew, I talk about flight crews often because they're going to be the ones that are in the sky using night vision devices to locate what it is that they are pursuing. That's why I'm referring many times to flight crews. They are not going to fly directly behind us when the moon is in front of them. That would be similar to you or I in the middle of the day looking directly at the sun. We can't do it. It's going to blind us. It's going to be extremely painful on our eyes. We just won't be able to see. The similar thing rather happens at night when someone is using a night vision device. When they're looking directly at the moon, that is similar to looking directly at the sun during the middle of the day. So rather than flying directly behind us, the flight crews will need to fly diagonally, keeping the object that they are pursuing or tracking to the side, whether that's to the right or to the left, whichever way the object is. This aids us in that it takes longer for them to fly diagonally to get to us than if they flew directly to us, right? The shortest point between objects, it's a straight line. They cannot take advantage of that straight line when the moon is directly in front of them. They need to fly diagonally. This will give us longer to evade because it takes them longer to locate us. And as well, we are going to be able to hear them coming near to us sooner than if they were flying directly behind us. So that's how we can effectively take advantage of the moon as well as the lunar phases in really knowing when to operate at the darkest points of night when a night vision device is going to be least effective. Again, we spoke about how the user can use infrared, and on a clear, cloudless sky, stars will actually be able to make up for a lack of moonlight. But again, I said there is multiple strategies we can use. So in future videos, I'm going to discuss how we can take advantage of different situations like weather events, a low cloud ceiling. And when we pair all of these things together, that's when we are going to have many tools in our tool chest, as it were, that we can draw on in an emergency when we are being pursued so we can effectively evade. Future videos will also discuss how we can evade both infrared and thermal devices. A lot of people think once someone is tracking us with thermals that it's game over. It's not. There are some extremely effective strategies that we can take advantage of. All right, so thanks for checking this out. And as usual, until next time, remain alive.